My guest for this episode is high-stakes poker player Sam Greenwood, who recently launched a new Substack called the Punt of the Day. We talked about his high-stakes poker career, getting into poker in Toronto, and now being a writer on Substack. Let's get into it. Sam, thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here as well.
So I've never actually interviewed you, but I will say over the last couple of years, I've covered you in a lot of events, mainly on the EPT circuit, a lot of those high rollers. I know you're grinding a lot of those. And yeah, for the last couple of years, I've traveled to wherever, Paris, Monte Carlo, Barcelona. And so I'm really excited to talk to you. And we as poker fans have actually been able to get insight into your play on those high roller circuits from a new newsletter that you started called Punt of the Day. So we're going to get into that and more. I'm really excited for that. But I want to go back just to start us off. You have an interesting story because, two of your brothers are actually poker players as well. And so it seems to run in the family. So let's go back to the early days growing up in Canada. And when did poker become a part of your life for you and your brothers?
Um, well, poker in terms of we always would play cards. It was before phones. It was before whatever. You needed to entertain yourself somehow. So we'd always play cards, but usually we just played kind of like the gimmick fun poker, like Chicago night baseball, like the Crazy Eights, like those sorts of like card games. So, we always had always had like a bunch of decks of cards around and like chips and stuff. But I think like a lot of people, we didn't really start playing Texas Hold'em till the ESPN started showing like the Moneymaker year and online poker became a big thing. And they did. I don't know what a poker was like back then, but they did such a good job of making it seem like if there was a game to play, like don't play any of these other nonsense games. Play No Limit Hold'em, and it just became the dominant game so quickly. And that's then Max started playing when he was in university. Peter Jedden got him into poker, and then Luke and I just started playing when we were in high school. Um, and we started just playing free worlds. Um, yeah, I said this. It used to be that free worlds would fill up. They like start at 6 p.m. or whatever, and you'd need to be at your computer at 5 p.m. to because that's where registration would open. And I guess my guess is it was like a technical thing where the sites probably couldn't handle more than a certain number of people. The tournaments would fill up. And then you'd get into free world, and then it won a lot of money on a free world, and just from there, kind of.
So just for context, when you were starting to play online in these free rolls, when was this? Was this the early 2000s?
I was in high school, probably 2004, 2005, something like that. Yeah.
So right after the money maker boom, it sounds like. So kind of the perfect time for three brothers who are interested in poker to really get into a game like this.
Yeah, I remember there was like a joke that somebody said on 2+2, which was like, why would you ever work at McDonald's when you could like play like just $11 sitting goes and make like $20 an hour? And like not just in terms of the games were soft. There used to be the thing called the move of honor where you would just shove all in, like shove 100 blinds with aces and somebody would call to you. There was a lot of money to be had in that way in the game, but also just like um so many like deposit bonuses and like all those sorts of things that it it was you were set up to, if you listened to the right people and you knew what to do, you were set up for success pretty well back then.
And so you have two brothers that you mentioned. Luke is your twin brother, and then you have an older brother, Max. How much older is Max than the two of you?
Max is 3 years older than me or us.
So you're all pretty close in age. What was it like when you were getting into poker as far as are all of you mathematically inclined or really competitive or what? I guess it's kind of interesting that all three of you share this interest.
Well, I think some of it had to do with the fact that Luke and I definitely had like a little brother thing where you really idolized your big brother, and like his I mentioned he had friends, Max and his friends started playing, and then you're like, oh, I'll do the thing they were doing. And then I think also there was always an element of like I'm mathematically inclined and I'm good at math, but I also hit the limits of how, like I would take uh like one of my friends from high school he started working in the analytics department for the Raptors. He's now an assistant coach for the Raptors, and he got an aerospace engineering degree at U of T. And when we were in like the AP math classes together, I was like didn't understand what was going on. I was struggling. I needed to like figure out these concepts. And he would just like show up before like the tests and be like, "Oh, I got it." And I realized that there's sort of like applied maths and sort of problem solving and stuff like that I had the brain for, but the total raw math, like engineering, math PhD, whatever type brain, like that's like a level above mine. So we all succeeded and were good at math, but like none of us were. I mean, you get to the point where you do you do like math contests in high school or whatever, the international ones, and I'd be like, oh, I got like four questions right, and the other people will be like, I got eight questions right, and I'm like, okay, well, like I don't know, you recognize where you are in the pecking order, that there's always someone that's going to be better than you.
Yeah, I know all about it. I originally in college wanted to study biology, and then when I got to the college level of some of those organic chemistry classes and stuff, I realized, hey, maybe writing is more my strength. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
definitely get it. Uh, but that's a good transition, I guess, to well, before we talk about going into college, so those early online days, if you're playing in high school, uh, are you playing free rolls or are you using your parents' credit card to deposit? How'd you get started?
I played Free Worlds and I cashed in Free Worlds, and then I played like 1 cent games and then 2 cent games and then yada yada yada. I mean, it's just like a video game at that point. You just want to get the high score in your bank account. And like by the time I had sort of like a goal I had in mind was I could play because I couldn't play MTTs when I was in high school lately. I know some people did, like Mike McDonald did, but Mike McDonald lived the story of like biking home from school so he could like register the one on I buy or whatever. But I wanted to play sit and go do cash game type things where I could play, I could sit down for an hour and play. And my goal was to play $100, get 100 buy-ins and so I could play $100 sit and goes. And I did that by the time I entered university. And then at some point in time, like sit and go action became there wasn't anything grounded like it's a pretty basic game. I mean, even if you look now, it's even as it's kind of an interesting form of poker, it just kind of died. And then I thought, well, I prefer tournaments to cash games because I like the competitive element to it. The idea of it's just so exhilarating. Any tournament, going deep in a tournament is just fun. Again, it's like a video game where you're like, okay, I made it through level one, made it through level two, and you just keep going. And cash games always never they never like spoke to me that way, and I never really had the best soft skills to play cash games.
So it sounds like pretty early you figured out that tournaments are your specialty and you haven't really turned back since then and don't play much cash.
I mean, right now, online cash I mean, and not even just right now, for the past like 10-15 years, online cash has been kind of like arms race of like making sure you can get the best seats and sitting around at your computer all day. And I know I naturally didn't have the best cash game skills, but once I found out that so much of um cash games was like sitting around at your computer waiting for a game to start, or for live cash games getting in a game and staying in the game, the idea of a tournament where like, you know, I can tell you whatever a month from now, I'm like, it'll be this tournament and it starts at 2 o'clock and I'll be there. You don't know when you leave. That's kind of the downside to it, but the idea of just sitting around your computer all day waiting for a game to start um, just seems so miserable to me.
Would you say that online cash games have gotten too predatory or just too competitive, or kind of what do you think has led to the state of where they are now?
Well, the state of where they are now is that like GG is the biggest online poker site, and GG decided they didn't want to run games that weren't private games. I mean, that's what happened with that. But I don't know that they were ever like too predatory. It's just that the nature of it is that in like a tournaments can have you can get 1,000 unique players playing the same tournaments. If you get a couple businessmen who want to play a high stakes tournament, then you know a lot of other players can show up. Well, if one businessman wants to play a cash game, there's only 5 seats. That's just how it works. And in terms of, I don't think it got like too predatory or anything. I just think that's what's going to happen when there's a limited number of people who, there's just a limited number of seats at the table.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk then about when you went to university. I've talked to a lot of other people who got into poker around the poker boom, and a lot of it is the same story. They go to college, they're typically good students, they do well in school, but then they find out, kind of like you said, they're making more money playing poker than they would be at McDonald's, and then school kind of goes by the wayside. Was that your experience, or what did you see yourself going and pursuing poker more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd always have these kind of little sort of like sanity checks almost where I'm like, hey, like so long as I'm going to, as long as I'm showing up to class, so long as I'm like doing this, it's fine. And then like it quickly became, well, like, I don't know, this class is early in the morning. We're like, okay, I went to one of the two lectures this week or what have you. And but that also competed with, playing poker, but also just, both the fun university stuff of like, oh, go partying with your friends and that sort of stuff, but also like the classic university things of just like sitting on your couch, like watching TV all day, you know? Um, in theory, I would like to be like, oh, every time um I skipped class, it was because there was some really soft like 25-50 game going on, or I just had some crazy night out with my friends. But like a lot of times it's like, oh, I was just like watching The Sopranos on my couch or whatever, which ain't nothing wrong with that. But um so I've always kind of believed in balance, and I felt like, so long as I can pass and get my diploma and do all that, that there will be some um it like sort of kept maybe some more obsessive habits I have at bay. Where I said, hey, if I can do these two things at once, then that's fine. And would like it probably meant I wasn't the best student and I wasn't the best poker player, but I did manage to do both.
You mentioned sanity checks. What was your bankroll management like back then? And were there any scary moments where, you're 19 years old and you have a, five-figure downswing or something like that?
I was pretty nitty bankroll wise, and in the sense that like I was fortunate enough that my parents paid for university and stuff like that. I didn't have a lot of expenses. So the idea again of like losing, having like a big 5-figure downswing, it sucked in the sense that I was like, oh, this is this video game that I want to get this high score and I want to get more money. I want to play higher stakes. But in terms of how it affected my day to day, it wasn't that bad. Now, maybe if I, went back in time, I would be like, oh, I'm like forgetting, a 6 month period where I went on like a 20K downswing and was just absolutely miserable. I'm sure that happened. But like looking back on it now, it's never the amount of money I was winning or losing was never so it was never like extreme in a real dollar sense. Like obviously losing being 19 and losing like $20,000 is a lot, but there's a part of you that's like, well, I'll graduate university, I'll get a job, like, that's an amount of money you can make back, and not like you're losing a house or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And was it helpful having your brothers there as kind of like a support system? Do you think that that has helped you?
Yeah, I think, most people who do well in poker in whatever capacity have some sort of support system that I think um it's nice, but it's different when it's family. If it's a friend or somebody you met through poker, like there is not that intimacy, there's not that familiarity. Um, if you want to like talk about life things, sometimes it might feel like an imposition with like a poker friend. Um, but if it's family, it doesn't feel that way. So I think that helped a lot.
Yeah, definitely having not having those people who say like, why are you doing this? And I told you were going to lose money and stuff like people who get it basically, I think is important.
Yeah, that too. That also helped a lot. That just like this idea of like it's not crazy. It's not, you know. I mean, it is a little crazy, but
So I think there are probably a lot of people from that era who discovered online poker, maybe ran up a bankroll, but there's very few, probably only a handful of others other than yourself who turned that into, a decades long pursuit of reaching the highest stakes of poker, playing $300,000 buy-in tournaments, $100,000 buy-in tournaments. What was the turning point when you saw, that there was potential in this?
I mean, the reality is I started looking at the fields of some of these big tournaments and I went like, okay, some of these players I went, oh, they're really good players, do better than me. And then I'd look at other guys and I go, I think I'm better than them. And not the like the businessmen, just like other professional poker players. And I thought to myself, I'm like, how can you get yourself into these tournaments? And I think even now, not just in like in any form of poker game, there is kind of an inertia where once you like even in like a home game, if there's a guy who shows up one week, he's a new guy, and if he shows up 5 weeks in a row, he's like, oh, he's the guy, he's in the home game, right? And there is an element of super high rollers where they do kind of have this sort of, as weird as it is, kind of this home game element where people show up and you talk and you're like, oh, how are your kids, how this, you learn about each other. And I knew that, this was back when the PCA and Aussie Millions back to back. Where I'm like, well, if I can play the tournaments in the PCA and do well, and then these tournaments right after them in Australia, then by the time Monaco rolls around, which at the time the war was basically EPTs and Aussie Millions for high rollers. Even uh, I forget when the first 100K one drop was, but even like Vegas, the one it took a while for them to get big high rollers in there. And I thought, once I can do that, then by the time like Monaco rolls around, if I can put up results, I'll have played 5 or 6 of these things. People will, hopefully I'll have put on a performance that people like respect and I'll be able to keep playing them. So um yeah, I mean it just started with me being like I think I belong in these, even if I'm not the best player, I think I'm better than people playing these things. So I think I can get in there and I think I'll do well on them. And then I did get lucky. I cashed the very first one I played. Um so I mean, in terms of just whatever odds, that's probably like a whatever 1 in 6, 1 in 7 chart. So I mean, pretty nice to do that immediately because even now I was talking to somebody about this. A student I'm doing private coaching with is doing is in a bit of a downswing, and I looked at my results and I'm like, I've gone like, in live poker like 30, 40 straight tournaments without cashing a tournament. Um, so the idea that like, cash, obviously that would have been unlucky, but if I did that to start off, I probably wouldn't have kept playing them, kept playing the really big buy-ins. So it was nice to immediately get that kind of positive reinforcement of cashing the first one.
Yeah, so you cashed that first one. Do you remember exactly how much you cashed for? And did you say what event that was? When was that?
It was the PCA 100K in,
Mm.
I want to say 2015. I'm looking it up on Hand and Mob right now. I think that's right. And I think who else cashed? Sorel cashed it. Sorel Mizzy, Bryn, I think, cashed it. Trying to think who else. Andrew Rogel. I mean, that's a long ago. It was when Andrew
Hmm.
Rogel was still playing 100K tournaments, you know? That might have been the one that Steve O'Dwyer beat Roger Sipple heads up in. I'm looking it up right now. Let's see if I'm right about this. I think with the one will 20, 20, oh, yeah, it was 2015. I came sixth. Steve O'Dwyer beat Roger Sipple, Bryn Kenny third, Sorrell fourth, Christoph fifth, Andrew Roble seventh, Scott Seaver eighth, Jake Schindler ninth. So yeah, interesting. I mean, I guess a lot of us are still playing these things 10 years later. Steve is, Bryn is, Christoph is, I am. Jake Schindler would be if he could.
Yeah, and well, that's one thing that I've noticed is covering these EPTs, PCA type high roller events is there are definitely the regulars and kind of it does seem like the same group of a few dozen players who you see in a lot of these events. And in Canada specifically, there's like a cohort of you, Timothy Adams and Daniel Devoras and people like that. Talk about kind of you mentioned that it does kind of have a home game atmosphere. Can you talk more about that and kind of what it's like despite playing for millions of dollars, kind of having camaraderie with this group of similarly minded people?
Yeah, I mean, there's two types of. I think what happens is as you play these things more often, the more you play them, the more it just becomes um you lose almost perspective of the stakes because you go, oh, I played with these, in like Tritons, you go, I played with this person in a $15,000 tournament, and now I'm playing in this person in a $150,000 tournament, and I'm playing in the same room, and it's like the same chipset, and it's the same this, that, and the other. Um, so because of that, I think there's this element of that where sometimes it had that element of it because you can lose perspective a little. But the other thing is it's just like, you see the same people over and over again and you develop, jokes with them and banter and you want to, it is a fun experience. And I don't really play the World Series very much anymore, but I remember during Triton Bahamas, Brandon Steven made a comment about how, oh, everyone here seems to be having fun playing the 100K, and like in Vegas, he said a lot of people are miserable and it's whatever. And I do think there is an element of, yeah, they're all here to like, play poker. It's kind of like, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but it's kind of like the a lot of the conversation that's going on in baseball right now about like bat flipping and should players have fun and all that sort of stuff. Where yeah, when you're playing game like 25 of the season in the middle of June, like yeah, maybe you'll like mess around a little bit and joke and whatever. And if it's game 7 of the World Series, then you'll probably all the jokes will disappear. And I think if you're away on these stops for like 15, 20 days, I even remember Boss was playing in Monaco and he made a comment to Adrian Mateos about Adrian being on his phone, like while they were playing, like not in a hand, but like at the table. And he said, made a joke because Adrian is one of the guys who's the most locked in players. And he's like, how do you like, oh, even you're on your phone? And Adrian was just like, yeah, it's like 15 straight days. I can't possibly have that same level of intensity for 12 hours a day for 15 straight days. It's just crazy. And I think that's also where you start to see some of the kind of camaraderie and banter and like joking around sort of come in where people realize like, hey, we're going to be here tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And if you're just full on like, like robot mode, even like Ivy, is like joking around and making jokes and talking at the table and stuff like that. And I think even with Phil, he used to, I think, I don't know if he's ever told me this, but my guess is that he used to think being like the Terminator at the table and having the super intimidating table presence gave him a big edge. And he would just steal people down and be like, basically, like, you don't want to play a part with me. And the people wouldn't. But now I think he realizes, hey, I'm playing with these people all the time. Though I've seen them play back at me. They were like no longer necessarily as intimidated as they would have been when they were like a 21-year-old kid. And I was like, well, like, so what am I going to do? Am I just going to like steal people down all day, or I'm going to kind of have are we going to have a more like pleasant, fun day? And I think overall, like generally, when people see a lot of clips from high rollers, they're at like final tables, or even just generally like TV tables, kind of. If like you feel like you're on a set, and then you kind of feel like you need to play the part of being like this, locked in tournament like master expert guy. And I think because of that, people don't realize how much sort of jocularity there is at the outer tables, like when we're playing.
It's definitely something that I've noticed as a live reporter, because yeah, the non-TV final tables, you do get a lot of the good banter and table talk and just kind of personal banter between players. So it is definitely something I've noticed, and I don't know, it would be great to get coverage of that stuff. But like you said, once the cameras are on, then it is like being on a set. But it's
And
been cool, yeah,
just on like a physical level, you're further away from people. Like it is harder to talk to people, you know?
yeah,
Like there are just those practical things that make it all a little less intimate when you're on TV.
totally. But it has been fun. Again, that's one of the many fun things about my job is I kind of get those behind the scenes looks. And so sticking on those kind of European high roller circuits, one other thing that's interesting about them is that even at these super high buy-in levels, whether it's 150,000, 500,000, you get these kind of recreational players who just for whatever reason stand out. I'm thinking of people like Jean Noel-Thorel, who has actually done very well. And he's a French businessman. And then the other one who I know that you played some hands with in a Triton 150K is the Vladimir Korzinin, who got the nickname Gambledore for his nice wispy beard.
Mm.
Uh, Talk about those players on the scene, and I don't know, do they make what sort of a vibe do they bring to the table to have kind of less serious players there?
Well, I mean, yeah, Jean Noel is like I've been playing with Jean Noel for you know over a decade now. And he's a guy who also has gotten a lot better at poker. Like, he I think there's a funny thing with sometimes John Noel will play like a crazy hand, and then I'll talk to, well, I've heard through the grapevine kind of like, oh yeah, he was just like tired and just wanted to like leave, right? Which if you have the amount of money he has, you can do that. That's fine. That's fine. And I think Jean Noel has actually improved quite a bit. But it's the same kind of thing where like, as you're more familiar with people, you get to know people more, you like joke around with them a little more. Uh and I think at first, I think a lot of it has to do with also kind of generally how the regular players who aren't the businessmen have kind of matured too. I think like if someone like Jean Noel probably is more interested or like enjoys like kind of me as a 35-year-old than like me as a 22-year-old, you know? No disrespect to any like listeners here who between the age of like, like 18 to like 25, but people at that age can be very like annoying or arrogant or what have you. And now most of the people, a lot of the people playing the tournament, have wives, have kids, have families, or are adults. So even if the age gap remains the same, maybe the maturity gap has shrunk a little. And I think that means they're having the businessmen who are having a little more fun at the table. It feels a little more respectable in that sense.
Yeah, those are some fun players. The the Gambledore guy, Vladimir, there was a clip
Yeah.
I was just watching from a Triton where I think you flopped like a combo draw and you check raised all in and he
Yes, I
called
know
with an
that.
overpair.
Yeah.
Talk about playing against him because he kind of went viral there and he kind of came out of nowhere and I think he won an event and maybe had another final table, so
He
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 seemed to
came
just go on a tear.
second. He came second in the 200K and won the 150K.
Wow.
I had played with him before. He played a fair amount of EPTs. He was in Barcelona this year. He'd been in Cyprus and Prague before. You know, what's funny is that he played Prague during Christmas, and because of the beard and whatever, he kept calling himself Santa Claus. So it's funny that his nickname, like that's what he was known to as, be Santa Claus. And now Gambledore, I don't know who coined it, if it was Ali or if it was just somebody in the chat, but Gambledore has taken over. um yeah, no, that was also funny because I have like one of my best friends from growing up sent me a YouTube video that was like, check out how this unconventional poker player won like $5 million. And I'm like, oh, surely he sent this clip to me because they had the ace five suited was queen's hand in it, but they didn't. They had like eight other hands in the package, but not that one. And I just thought it was so funny that he had gone so viral that like my friend doesn't play poker. It had escaped, like it had gone over to his like Instagram or whatever algorithm to the point where he sent it to me, but he didn't even know I played this massive pop with him. Um, yeah, he's a like again, I don't know, his story is he made a bunch of money in finance, I believe is basically it. And again, like he's just a very always laughing at the table, always joking around, very fun to play with. And again, like um he's one of those guys who a lot of times, you know, some of the businessmen kind of might play like a almost like at the 109 rebuy back in the day where they're just trying to like gamble to get a stack early on. But then once they get in the money of the tournament, they play, you know, their version of serious poker and they want a trophy and they want to win. And so some of the time those guys, they're like they have so much money that the worst hand is like them basically just like messing around. You know, it's like me hitting on like an 18 in blackjack for fun, right? Which like I don't have that switch or that instinct or anything like that. But a lot of these guys, like, yeah, when you get deeper, they change their game, and that's the other thing that can be tough about playing with them too, that you need to really be observing when they kind of switch gears because they can have very rapid gear shifts for sure.
Yeah, I imagine they're pretty self-aware about their table presence. They probably know that they're probably thought of as being, not a professional player.
Yeah, they're not sorry, they're not stupid people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, they're definitely aware of their table image, and it's like, oh, so yeah, being good at specific technical poker things is not all that particularly linked to like general intelligence, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sticking just a bit more on the high roller circuit, I'm sure there are a lot of aspiring poker players or fans who want to get up to those stakes and traveling the world playing high stakes poker tournaments kind of sounds like the dream. Give us the rundown on what are your favorite stops and what advice do you have for people who want to travel playing high stakes poker for a living?
I will say that you know, stops have shifted because it used to be that like there was a lot more downtime. Now there's just tournaments every day, and a lot of it's like, what makes a good stop? It's like, well, there's a direct flight, and you know, like the hotel has like good air conditioning or like, you know, whatever the things out. But in terms of favorite stops, this is kind of a weird one because tournament poker is not happening there. But I really liked Macau. There was something I found so Because you could go to Hong Kong before and after, and Hong Kong's a great city. And like there's something I really liked about the it's kind of like degeneracy of Macau. The food was great, and the poker was great, and the hotels were nice. Um, in terms of cities, like there's a definitely a link between like, I think overall I prefer um Paris to Barcelona as a city. Paris in February versus Barcelona in August. No contest. It's Barcelona. So there's that element too. We're like, I'm not the biggest fan of Monaco. I spent a lot of time there. It's really expensive and it's marginally nicer than like Nice, and like other areas of the French Riviera. And it's like significantly more expensive. And I feel historically like servers do not like treat you well there when you get bad service unless you like own a yard, it kind of feels like. Maybe I need to get like a loyal piano hat or something like that. Get one of those things that will start treating me better. Um, but yeah, I know Barcelona in August says like in terms of a stop, it's hard to beat. The other thing I'll say is if you're doing kind of the mid high stakes, not high roller things, I would definitely recommend checking out the events by the APT and the events by Poker Dream. They're really fun and then kind of like, you got to go to Asia, which is, you know, I don't know, like Europe is beautiful and nice, but I feel like some of the stops in Asia are just a little more exotic, a little more off the beaten path, and like maybe wouldn't be places that like an American or a European would naturally travel to. Where like the idea of, it's pretty normal for, to graduate university and like backpack through Europe and check out all the major cities. And I love Europe and I love all the cities there, but I think the combination of kind of value and kind of getting to see some fun more exotic places. I think Poker Dream and the APT are quite nice for that.
Do you have a craziest travel story? I know, like, for example, Steve O'Dwyer a couple years
Yeah.
ago, an airline lost his bag for like 2 weeks and he really put him on blast on social media. Anything like that ever happen to you?
Um, no, I've been lucky in terms of like losing my luggage, knock on wood, nothing that bad has happened to me. Um, I mean, I'm sure I'm blanking on it. Obviously, I haven't had anything like that. I mean, I've anything. Maybe by the end of the podcast. I know like
We can come back to it.
yeah.
So let's talk a bit about kind of just more broadly. So you sit, I think it's 18th on the all-time money list if Hendon Mob is correct right now. And so you have nearly 40 million in earnings, right up there. And in Canada specifically, you're third behind Daniel Devoras, who's probably a friend of yours, and then also Daniel Negreanu, who's number one. You're really neck and neck with Devoras. I think before when you were third on the list, it was Timothy Adams who was ahead of you, and then you passed him. Are you guys competitive? And do you wanna move up those rankings?
Yeah, I'm actually looking now and it's kind of funny. So we're 19, 18, and 17 like in a row.
Wow.
Uh, the reality is that um, since Tim does not play, or at the moment doesn't play PLO and short deck, and PLO tourneys are getting bigger and bigger, it's going to be hard for Tim to catch me. Like that's just, in a given year, I might just end up putting in an extra million or two in buy-ins, and in the long run, that's going to be hard to pass me. I would obviously like to pass these guys. But the flip side is I said this on page. No, sorry. Um, I said this before, but like doing well in a tournament is so hard. Most of the time you don't even cash. It's very rare to even win. I would like to pass like someone like Divorce on the all-time money list, but I would like to like, you know, pass it by like I come first in a tournament and he comes second in a tournament. Not like he goes out of the money for 40 tournaments and I'm in cash 3 tournaments. So I'm competitive in that sense, but like if it were it's so compared to like putting up good results and making money myself, it's so far down. These things are just so high variance and stressful to begin with that just like getting out of the woods without like losing a ton of money is already enough motivation.
So I mentioned you have nearly 40 million in live earnings. Uh, of course, you have a lot more in online earnings, and live earnings are a lot easier to track with things like the Hendon Mob. There are some resources like Pocket Fives for tracking online earnings, but not quite as easy. Can you give us some insight into how well you've done it online?
I don't really know. I mean, like the part of what happened also with online is, the points on GG, like especially now with like real name switches and like GG sometimes lets you change your name and like all that sort of stuff that I have no idea how much I've cashed for on GG. I don't even know if I've technically had like yeah, I don't know. Like I've all like legally and all like above board, but with real name change and stuff like that, I think I played on like 3 or 4 different account names on GG or screen names on GG. Party Poker used to have a thing where you could change your name, so like 2 or 3 names there. Poker Stars, I guess, will be the only one that's reliable. But I mean, yeah, I don't know, and I honestly wouldn't even know how to start.
Yeah, like I said, that stuff is more difficult to track. What are your thoughts on the state of online poker today? We talked about it a little bit, but with new technologies and RTA tools and ghosting scandals and things like that, do you still feel safe and comfortable playing online at high stakes?
Um, I think it's I think it's mostly fine. I think there will probably things that will go on throughout the margin that will kind of make it less exciting to play, that will probably lower your ROI. Um, Ghosting is one of the things that realistically always kind of existed. Unfortunately, like that's the ghosting scandals are something that probably used to be a lot more prevalent, if we're being honest. Um, and like RTA in tournaments is one thing because you need if like you try to play Chippy v robot poker in a tournament, you won't do that well because you'll end up making mistakes near the bubble and then the money and all those sorts of things. I think these the biggest I think oftentimes technology is kind of overstated in problems with online cheating, and like the bigger problem with online cheating are just kind of like classic like workout cheating type stuff, right? Um or collusion or like any of those sorts of things, which you don't need like you don't need a robot to be like, hey, I folded the ace of hearts here or whatever. You don't need anything that complicated. And unfortunately, I think um a lot of the volume in online MTTs are from stables, and I'm not saying anything like specific about any individual stables. I'm just saying like when you get a lot of the volume from like people who are all kind of playing under the same thing, like there's just all sorts of like once you get once you get paranoid about something, like it's really easy to get your wheels spinning. And I've had like times where, with like, to use like Ali and Jake, they got caught and were doing like a ton of stuff. I've had times where there've been people like that where I've been like, I'm 100% through cheating and I've been wrong. And there've been times where I'm like, they're 100% I'm cheating and I've been right. So I think you'd be naive to think nothing's going on. And obviously stuff is going on and it is affecting the bottom line of everyone who plays. But in terms of like things that I'm actually can confidently say these people or this stable or this or that, I don't know. It's too hard to say.
That's interesting you say that because another part of this is false positives or false accusations or people like you said being certain that somebody cheated them or thinking there's a high chance they were cheated and then they out them on social media and then it comes out that that person was playing on their account and they weren't being ghosted or things like that. Where do you think the line is as far as holding people accountable and going public with claims like that? Like, do you think it's good to be outing cheaters, or do you think it's better to keep tight-lipped until you have evidence or a smoking gun or something?
I mean, by my own actions, I think you need to be tight-lipped until you have evidence. It's a really big accusation to lob at somebody, and you, I think, need something that's pretty hard and concrete. And I think that happens all the time online where people are like, well, people like somebody in the comments of this podcast will say like, why doesn't he out people? And like I'll go, because somebody telling me a story of like, hey, these four people were doing this thing. Somebody I trust, somebody I believe, somebody who if I could maybe bet like at even money, I would take their side that they're telling the truth and they're not wrong. But like being 55% is not enough to throw somebody's name through the mud, especially when nothing will happen. Like if I were to say like, oh, Joe Schmo is cheating, uh, Bob told me that Joe is cheating, and then they go, oh, what evidence do you have? And I have put together this like case of like hearsay and nonsense. All that will happen is Joe Schmo will get mad at me, uh, and like nothing will change. I'm not going to get them banned or anything. So unfortunately, yeah, like the standard does need to be really high. And unfortunately, sites don't really have an interest in, um, if you're a site and you go, oh, we caught these people cheating. Well, they never say them by name. They just say, oh, we banned 8 accounts. And then they also don't really like publicizing it that much because if you're somebody who's not plugged into online poker and poker stars every day goes, oh, we caught like 12 cheaters or Gigi, like we caught 12 cheaters. Well, that person is going, well, they didn't catch everyone. Why would I want to play on your crooked site? So, yeah, to answer your question, like I do think that unfortunately, for like I know for the online drama, for the whatever, people like the idea of me just going out here and like reading off every rumor I've ever heard. I mean, I'm sure you know it too. Like when you're
Yeah.
reporting on poker tournaments, you hear all sorts of rumors. You hear, some of it is about like cheating, but some of it is like personal gossip. Some of it is, whatever. And you realize you go, oh, uh, once you hear, 10 things and three of them turn out to be not true, that's enough to make you pretty gun shy from publicizing them ever.
Yeah, I totally agree with you from like a reporter perspective. And it is something that comes up and is something that people have to consider is these are serious accusations and it takes a lot, or it should take a lot to, out someone publicly. So totally agree with you on that front. So let's go ahead and talk about it then. The new project that you have going is a Substack that you launched. It's called Punt of the Day. And this is a really unique thing because it's in parts poker coaching, where you're giving insight into strategy at this high roller level. But at the same time, it's a glimpse into your personality and your humor. And as we were just talking about, that's a side of the high stakes poker scene that not a lot of people get to see. So, what inspired you to start this project?
I, I think about how I got started in poker and how I started studying, and it started on, 2+2, the one training sites. And it was a lot of sort of text-based hand history analysis. There wasn't really software. I remember sitting go power tools with it was like a push forward ICM like calculator that didn't create a strategy. It just told you like, hey, if this guy's shoving this much, this is what you need to call, That was the first piece of software I bought. And I like the idea of doing something that I've compared it to, when you go to the game section of the newspaper and they're the chess puzzle of the day or the crossword or the Sudoku. I kind of was like, hey, this could be kind of like a poker puzzle of the day. Now I'm also, it's an essay. I'm giving my answer right away. It's not like a quite a play along with or guess what the right players thing. But I think if you're a poker player, I would look at I never got into chess. And I would look at the chess puzzle and go, I don't know what to do. And then I would see the answer and be like, that doesn't make any sense to me because I don't know how to play chess. And I thought, for poker players, I think that might be kind of a fun idea where you get a hand a day and get like I, but you also want to make sure that I want to make sure that I dealt with both the psychological element of poker and the technical side of poker. Because if it's at the technical side, kind of boring. Well, it's not just that it's kind of boring. It's also that there's a lot of that content out there, and I wanted it to be pitched to, it's not the Substack is $100 a year for an annual subscription and $10 a month if you do want to do monthly, and then $300 a year if you want to do the premium subscription where it comes with, you get access to Sims I've run, you get access to a Discord channel I'm in where I give extra analysis, all that sort of stuff. And I wanted it to be that if you're somebody who never looked at a solver output in your life, but played a lot of poker, that you could read what I wrote. It would all make sense to you. It would all be, you'd pick something up, you'd learn something, whether it's, a technical thing or an exploitive thing, or like a psychological thing or a library thing or a timing thing, whatever it is. So that's kind of what I wanted. And there was a lot of content like this, and I do it, and I make it for run at once. I wanted, like, I thought when I was writing the first couple, I'm like, well, should I include a screenshot of like a GTO wizard output? And I was like, no pictures, no charts, no nothing. If you can't communicate it clearly, if like, and also like same thing with like, I wanted it to be a point where it was well enough written and my thoughts were clear enough that you wouldn't need a chart because I would highlight the key parts of the hand and you wouldn't need the extra information. So that's kind of what I was going for, that it's real analysis. It is deep and it is technical, but it's something you don't need to be like an expert to be to understand. That's kind of what I was shooting for.
Yeah, well, as a poker fan, but someone who doesn't play at the highest levels, I can say you succeed with this in making it accessible but also insightful. So I've definitely been enjoying it. How has the reception been so far, and what sort of subscribers are you getting? Are these poker pros or casual players, or who's being
Uh,
receptive to this?
I will say the reception overall has been positive. There's always kind of a top selection bias where I think the people who maybe wouldn't care for it wouldn't comment on it. But it is fun because I can look at the email list of subscribers and like many people have like first name dot last name at gmail.com kind of emails. So I'm like, oh, that's nice. This person's subscribing. Like, good to see them doing it. I've also kind of reached out to people who I know, who I met over the years, who, kind of were home game type players. And I was like, well, what do you think of this? Do you like it? How's it written? How's it that, a lot of these people are people I've, write or podcast or something like that for a living. So I wanted kind of that sort of feedback as well from like an editorial perspective, what they thought of it. Uh, Copy editing too has been big because I'm naturally not a lot of, as people could see on my like Twitter, a lot of like missed words, a lot of like, you know, things like that. Sometimes I'm thinking fast as I'm faster than I'm writing almost, and you just somebody reads a sentence and you're like, you forgot the subject in this sentence. And I'm like, yeah, that's um no, but the reception has been positive, and the thing I'm mostly happy about again is obviously the people I want like I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I would like to make money from this if it doesn't turn into something. I've committed to doing it for a year because I have yearly subscribers. If after it is a reasonable amount of work, and if after a year I'm not getting enough money, then I'll move on from it probably. But so the two things I like are, yeah, it is nice getting, you know, top poker pros subscribing and commenting and liking it. That's quite nice. But the other thing I like seeing is the number of people who have gotten like messages from who are like, I'm a lawyer. I used to play poker, seriously online. Now I do this, now I do that. To get that sort of response from people like that is really nice because um yeah, like I want to get it as big as possible. And if you're only getting, people who play poker, 4 times a week, that's a pretty small pool to be fishing in. Well, if you start getting people who play once a week or once a month or a couple, then it gets a lot bigger.
Well, it's great to hear that the reception has been good, and I know that a project like that has to be a lot of work, so your output has been impressive, and the setting a year goal for it is nice as well. What sort of a writing background do you have? If I'm remembering correctly, you also do some like you have like a movie review blog, is that right?
I mean, I used to way back when. I mean, as I'm sure writing is just like a game of like when you reread anything you write, it's just kind of a game of like how much do I hate this less than when like the previous
Yeah,
draft.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So that one got frustrating for me because with movies, I like movies and I like watching them and I like reading about them. I don't have the technical or historical knowledge to um sort of comment on them and synthesize my thoughts in a way that sound like the great movie writing that I've read. And you might say, well, that's like a crazy high bar to set for yourself, but it's sort of like, you're watching, I don't know, it's like you're watching somebody cook like dinner next to you and you're making the same thing and you put them both on a plate and you're like, well, these look totally different and mine looks like shit. So with poker, at least I'm confident that the technical stuff will be strong and then I can work on my writing. I've always liked writing. I've always, we had you know, my dad and like I think it's a pretty like Jewish thing where there's a lot of kind of like wit and humor and like that sort of stuff. So I've always kind of been interested in writing and like I've always had a good memory and a large vocabulary and that sort of stuff. But I've had no real like writing background beyond sort of trying to copy people who I read and like. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that and see a lot of similarities in my writing journey and writing outside of your expertise and things like that. But hey, I saw that movie blog and I value your movie opinions, so I don't know, you might be selling yourself a little short there.
Well, I mean, the last one was what, like 12 years ago or something? Let me look.
I don't know how I'm wondering how I saw it then. You must have been putting it on Twitter because
It
I'm a
was
little
it
newer on
was
poker.
it was in my Twitter. You know what? I can because I live in Toronto, so I usually go to the film festival. Um, so when it was going to the film festival, I would like write stuff. So okay, so the thing is that the last thing I was updating it kind of regularly in 2000. Oh geez. Oh no, okay. 2013, I was kind of doing it regularly ish. And then in 2015, I saw or 2016, I saw The Big Short, and I hated The Big Short so much that I felt compelled to write about it. Um, yeah, that was the only one that um I was in Vancouver and before or after Ozzy Meltons, I visited Donnie Stone and stayed with him in Vancouver. And they went to see The Big Short, and they were like, "Oh, we saw it already, and we liked it." Him and his wife Stephanie, and I was like, "I don't think I'm gonna like this. I just have a feeling like from the trailer, from the whatever, but sure, we'll watch it." And they were like, "Trust me, you like it." And 5 minutes in, I was just like, "I hate this movie. I hate it so much." Um, like in a way where like then as the movie progressed, it just made me just like it more and more and more. And then it's funny because looking back on the movie vlog here, I did give it 2 stars, which is funny because like I guess I gave it some sort of um bump because I felt it was like well acted or well crafted or whatever. But like the it's one of those things that I felt was so raw. Like it had redeeming elements, but was so rotten to the core, and that's what made me so mad about it. So I did give it 2 stars, but it is funny because it's like I hated it. You know, like for my Substack, I'm like I was supposed to bluff with Ace 3 and I bluffed with Ace 2 D plus. And then here I'm like, this was the worst movie I've ever seen. I hated it 5 minutes in. It sat in anger for an hour and 45 minutes until the end of the movie. Like, what did you give it? 2 out of 5 stars. You know?
Well, maybe there'll be a new movie that comes out that you hate so much that you get that blog back up and
Yeah.
running. We'll
I have
see.
a Yeah, I have a currently have a 1-year-old kid, so um I'm trying to reserve my movie watching for movies I like, opposed to movies I think I'll hate. But you never know, sometimes you're surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just have a couple more general questions as we wrap up here, but I'm glad that you mentioned you have a kid because maybe we should talk about that a bit. It sounds like that's probably a bit of a lifestyle adjustment for you.
Yeah, I mean you asked the online poker question and um the cheating and all that definitely played a role in me winding down my online action. I mean Poker Stars and Gigi pulling out of Ontario also has a lot to do with that as well. But also like it's just hard to play, every day I need to pick me or my wife need to pick them up and my wife works, needs to pick them up at daycare at 4 p.m. I can't start registering tournaments at 2 p.m. I need to pick them up. I need to uh give him dinner, feed him, all that. So that's the other thing in terms of me getting more into the Substack, where it's Substack and personal coaching and run once and all that is it's something that I can kind of do around normal hours and I have some flexibility. And then when I travel for poker, then it's all hands on deck for my wife at home, who is does a wonderful job and it's very hard. But at least from my perspective, I can kind of play in a bubble. Or like the idea of like there's a baby crying in the next room and I need to deal with him, but I can't blind out of tournaments has made the idea of play like, writing or doing, content type stuff a little more fun, a little more palatable and easy.
Yeah, well, hopefully the family will get some nice international vacations once your kid's a little older, maybe. They can travel with you.
Yeah, but even I mean, yeah, it would be fun, but again, it's one of those things where yeah, some of the trips for sure, like Bahamas is an easy trip, but like the idea of like something like Jeju,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, we're gonna fly Toronto to Seoul, take spend the night in Seoul, fly Seoul to Jeju, and then they're going to go to Jeju, which is uh, a fine poker destination, a nice poker room and hotel, and like the food sites or whatever, but like not exactly a, the funnest place in the world for a kid to be for 3 weeks. Although in the summer, I get they do a water park and an amusement park and like some stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, but Bahamas at least sounds perfect. But yeah. So,
Every
yeah,
poker
go ahead.
player has been to the Bahamas a million times and they've gotten so jaded about it. And then as soon as they have kids, they're like, I get it. I get it now. It's the perfect place to bring them. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like I said, I just have a couple more general questions as we wrap up here. One that I like asking guests is for a book recommendation that they would give. I'm sure you have plenty to give. If you'd rather give a movie recommendation that's not The Big Short, feel free to do that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, like again, with books and movies, I have been like, again, circling back to my Substack for a second, I also think there's an element of me now being like, I can't combination of like having a child and having the attention span of like a shrinking attention span, the idea of committing to things for long periods of time has been quite tough recently. Um, but let's see. Uh, you know, a movie I liked quite a bit that I saw. I'm trying to think. There was a period of time. There was a week, I guess, where me and my wife watched like movies in like three straight nights, and we liked all three of them. So one of them was Between the Temples, which is a new movie from last year, starring Kieran Kane and Jason Schwartzman. That's about he's like a cantor, so like a singer in Jewish synagogue. He's like the singer, and he loses his voice. And then the same time, his high school music teacher is converting to Judaism, and who's like an older woman, and he needs to like teach her how to sing. So we like that. Uh, what else? I'll also say for a plane movie, because that's the other time I watch movies.
Yeah.
I watched the first I watched all of M. Night Shyamalan's Trap on the plane, and I think the second half kind of goes off the rails, but the first half is like as entertaining like an hour of movie watching I've seen in quite some time. So I would recommend Trap as well.
It's funny you say that as the plane recommendation because that is what I watched. I'm trying to think where it was. Maybe going to Bahamas this year for WSOP Paradise. Maybe it was for Barcelona, but I watched it on a plane, so
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah, it's also fun because I'm from Toronto, and all the concert scenes are filmed outside the Sky Dome. So like I've been there like a million times, and like there's just the dumb like lizard brain thing of like seeing an area you've actually been in real life on TV. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So another question is, what is a piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
Uh the piece I have I would say probably, and this is again something that I could be giving to my present self, but I would say exercise more often. Good advice to younger self.
That's a good piece of advice for sure.
Yeah.
So the last question that I have, I like asking people.
And sorry, I'll add in one extra detail about that, which is also if there's something that you don't want to do because you don't regularly do it and you're afraid you'll be bad at it, or you're afraid you don't know what to do it anyways. Within like a week of doing it, it will feel somewhat natural and it won't be intimidating to do it.
That is great advice as well, and something that, I can definitely relate to, so that's good. So yeah, the last question is I like asking people for their favorite life lesson from poker. It's such a game that can be used as a metaphor for so many of other aspects of life, whether it's bankroll management, knowing when to fold, all these kind of just general pieces of wisdom. So, what is your favorite life lesson from the game of poker?
I think if that you don't know when like something great or horrible like will ever happen, and all you can kind of do is control like your process, and make sure you show up and the whole thing of whatever, like I'm going to mangle the quote, but it's like luck is when like opportunity meets, or no, like success is when luck meets opportunity or something like that. And like the more you show up, the more you have a chance to be the beneficiary of good luck.
That's great advice for sure. Well, Sam, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. Hope to see you at some upcoming stops. Are you going to be at the World Series of Poker this summer?
Uh Probably not. There's just too much Triton and whatever that World Series is, because of the Canadian withholding tax. The World Series is just kind of like vacation, go to Vegas, see my friends, that sort of stuff. And um maybe I'll go last minute to do that, but I'm not planning on it because I like being home in the summer.
Well, we'll miss you there, but then we'll definitely see you at the next high roller stop.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.